My name is Ethan Caldwell, and at 38, I never thought I'd be sitting in my Tesla Model S outside Gold's Gym at 6:47 a.m., watching my wife's personal trainer load boxes into a U-Haul truck. 6 months ago, I threw Sophia the perfect 40th birthday party at our Malibu Hills home. 80 guests, professional caterers, a string quartet playing on our infinity pool deck. By the end of that night, I'd discovered she was stealing more than just my heart. If you're wondering why I'm smiling as I watch Blake Morrison disappear into federal custody, stick around. Before I continue, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I turned my wife's betrayal into the takedown of a multi-million-dollar fraud ring. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a cramped apartment in East Cleveland with my mom, Patricia, who worked the night shift cleaning office buildings downtown. Coming home at dawn with swollen hands and the permanent scent of industrial disinfectant clinging to her uniform. Money was always a calculation. Christmas meant one gift from the dollar store. Birthdays were celebrated with homemade cake from a box mix. Vacations existed only in the travel brochures I'd collect from the library. From an early age, I understood that technology was my escape route. While other kids played video games, I took them apart to see how they worked. When my classmates went to parties on weekends, I worked at Best Buy's Geek Squad, saving every dollar and learning everything I could about computer systems. My obsession with cybersecurity started when our apartment was broken into twice in 1 month. I couldn't protect our physical space, but I became determined to master digital protection. My efforts paid off when I received a partial scholarship to Case Western Reserve University. Even then, I worked 30 hours a week fixing computers for professors and students, surviving on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at campus events. Those college years were a blur of coding marathons, cybersecurity competitions, and late-night shifts at the computer lab. After graduation, I landed a junior position at a Cleveland tech firm specializing in network security. Within 3 years, I'd identified enough vulnerabilities in their systems to realize I could do better on my own. That's when I founded CyberShield Solutions from my garage apartment, armed with $12,000 in savings and an unshakable belief that small businesses deserved enterprise-level security. We struggled initially. 18-hour workdays, maxed out credit cards, and the constant fear of a single client cancellation destroying everything I'd built. But by our 5th year, we'd secured contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies and began generating serious revenue. Today, CyberShield employs 47 people and generates $15 million annually. We've prevented over $200 million in potential cyber attacks for our clients. Throughout this journey, my personal life remained fairly simple, until I met Sophia Martinez at a tech conference in San Diego 8 years ago. She was the marketing director for FitLife Apps, a startup developing personalized workout platforms. I was immediately drawn to her confidence and the way she could explain complex user engagement strategies in terms that made perfect sense. At 32, she had the kind of professional polish I'd never encountered growing up in Cleveland. Our relationship developed quickly. Within 6 months, she'd moved to Los Angeles to be closer to me. Within 2 years, we were married in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific. Sophia left FitLife when we got married, initially planning to start her own marketing consultancy. Instead, she became fascinated with fitness influencing, building an Instagram following that now exceeds 150,000 followers. We bought our current home in Malibu Hills 3 years ago, a 4-bedroom contemporary with walls of glass, an infinity pool, and a view that stretches from the Santa Monica Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. At $4.2 million, it was extravagant, but I wanted Sophia to have the kind of space where she could create content and host the lifestyle she'd built online. Sophia's fitness journey had always impressed me. She'd transformed from someone who occasionally attended yoga classes to a woman who could deadlift her body weight and had completed 2 marathons. Her dedication was inspiring, even when it meant 5 a.m. training sessions and carefully calculated meal prep that took over our kitchen every Sunday. 18 months ago, she started working with Blake Morrison, a 29-year-old trainer she'd met at Equinox. Blake specialized in functional fitness and had an impressive client roster of actors and tech executives. He was exactly the kind of trainer Sophia needed to take her content next level, someone who understood both the physical and visual aspects of fitness. At the time, I was grateful for Blake's influence. Sophia seemed happier, more confident, and her engagement rates were climbing steadily. She started talking about launching her own supplement line and potentially opening a boutique fitness studio. Her ambition reminded me of my own drive to build something meaningful. I should have paid more attention to the changes that came with Blake's training, the secretive phone calls during dinner, the sudden interest in cryptocurrency investing, the expensive workout equipment that kept arriving at our house, items that never seemed to be used for her content creation. Looking back now, I realize I was so focused on growing Cyber Shield that I missed the signs of what was really happening. I trusted Sophia completely, the way you trust someone who's built a life with you, someone who's seen you at your most vulnerable and chosen to stay. How quickly that trust would be shattered, I had no idea. What I discovered at her 40th birthday party would expose not just my wife's betrayal, but a sophisticated fraud operation that had been targeting successful men like me for over 2 years. The party I'd planned as a celebration of everything we'd built together would become the night I learned that the person I loved most had been systematically helping someone destroy the life we'd created. The planning for Sophia's 40th birthday party consumed my attention for weeks. I wanted everything perfect. Not just because she deserved it, but because I genuinely believed we were entering the best phase of our lives together. CyberShield had just signed our largest contract ever with a major aerospace company. Sophia's follower count had crossed 150,000, and brands were finally reaching out with serious sponsorship offers. Everything felt aligned. I hired Celestial Events, the same company that had coordinated launch parties for 3 major tech IPOs. They transformed our backyard into something from a magazine spread. White silk draping between the palm trees, Edison bulb chandeliers suspended over the pool deck, a raw bar station where guests could watch oysters being shucked fresh. The string quartet I'd booked had performed at Google's holiday party the previous year. 83 people RSVP'd, including Sophia's entire family, my business partners, and several influencers she'd collaborated with. I even flew in her college roommate from Portland and her cousin from Miami. The caterer specialized in Mediterranean cuisine, Sophia's favorite, and I'd arranged for a signature cocktail called the Sophia, made with elderflower and champagne. The evening started exactly as I'd imagined. Sophia wore a black silk dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than my first car but looked absolutely stunning against her skin. She moved through the party with the kind of grace that made me fall in love with her all over again, hugging guests, posing for photos, and genuinely seeming to enjoy every moment. By 8:30, the party was in full swing. The quartet was playing a beautiful arrangement of The Way You Look Tonight, and I was standing by the raw bar with Marcus Rivera, my business partner, discussing our plans for expanding into the healthcare cybersecurity market. That's when I noticed Sophia's sister Madison approaching with an expression I couldn't quite read. Madison worked as a senior analyst at Merrill Lynch and had always been the more serious of the two sisters. At 35, she possessed the kind of financial acumen that made her wealthy clients trust her with 8-figure portfolios. She rarely showed emotion, which made the tension in her face particularly noticeable. "Ethan," she said, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard, "I need to show you something. It's important." She guided me away from the crowd, toward the side of the house where the catering staff was setting up the dessert station. Her phone was already in her hand, screen illuminated with what appeared to be a text message thread. "I wasn't snooping," she began, her voice carefully controlled. Sophia asked me to grab her phone from the kitchen to show Mrs. Henderson those before and after photos from her transformation. The screen was already open to her messages. My stomach began to drop before I even looked at the phone. Madison's expression told me everything I needed to know, but I took the device anyway, scrolling through a conversation between Sophia and someone labeled Blake Trainer. The messages were time-stamped throughout the past 3 weeks. Most were seemingly innocent discussions about workout schedules and meal planning, but as I scrolled down, the tone shifted dramatically. "Blake, miss you already. Can't wait for Thursday." Sophia, "Same. E has that aerospace client meeting all afternoon." Blake, "Perfect. I'll bring the massage oils you like." Sophia, "You know exactly what I need." Then, dated just that morning, the message that would replay in my mind for months. "Husband's at work. Come over now. Pool house is ready." My hands started trembling as I continued reading. There were references to overnight trips I thought were fitness retreats, mentions of equipment purchases that I now realized had nothing to do with Sophia's training. Most disturbing were discussions about my work schedule, my travel plans, and detailed information about our home security system. "There's more," Madison said quietly, taking the phone back. "I work with several venture capital firms that have invested in fitness franchises." Last month, I ran into someone who mentioned Blake Morrison specifically, not as a trainer, but as someone who'd been investigated for inappropriate relationships with married clients. The party continued around us. I could hear laughter from the pool deck, the clink of champagne glasses, and someone calling my name from across the yard. But everything felt distant, like I was underwater. "How long have you known?" I managed to ask. "I suspected something a few months ago when Sophia started asking strange questions about your business contracts and travel schedule. But I didn't have proof until tonight." Madison's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I really hoped I was wrong." I looked back toward the party where Sophia was posing for photos with a group of her fitness influencer friends. She looked radiant, completely at ease, laughing at something one of them had said. It was impossible to reconcile that image with the person who'd been systematically deceiving me for months. "There's something else," Madison continued. "Through my work, I have access to certain financial investigation tools. Last week, I noticed some unusual patterns in Sophia's credit card statements that you might want to review." She showed me a printed summary she'd apparently prepared in advance. Over the past 6 months, Sophia had made cash advances totaling $47,000. The money had been withdrawn from ATMs near luxury hotels in Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, and Laguna Beach, dates that corresponded perfectly with times I'd been traveling for business. But what disturbed me most were the charges labeled as business equipment and retreat investments. Sophia had been spending money on things that had nothing to do with her fitness content, including what appeared to be cryptocurrency purchases and payments to shell companies I'd never heard of. "Madison," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you think this is just an affair, or is there something more going on?" Her expression darkened. "Based on what I've seen in financial fraud cases, Blake Morrison isn't just sleeping with your wife. He's using her to access information about you, your business, and your assets. This has the hallmarks of a sophisticated operation." As if summoned by our conversation, Blake appeared on the other side of the pool, having apparently arrived sometime during our discussion. At 29, he possessed the kind of effortless physical confidence that probably made him irresistible to his clients. He moved through the party like he belonged there, shaking hands with guests and accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. What struck me most was how naturally he interacted with everyone, as if he'd been part of our social circle for years rather than months. He knew names, remembered previous conversations, and displayed the kind of charm that would make anyone trust him immediately. I watched as he approached Sophia, placing his hand briefly on the small of her back in a gesture that appeared casual, but felt intimate. She turned toward him with a smile I recognized, but had never seen her direct at another man, at least not since we'd been married. "What do you want to do?" Madison asked. For a moment, I considered confronting them immediately, in front of all our guests, letting the righteous anger building in my chest explode into the perfect evening I'd spent weeks planning. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the entrepreneur in me, the part that had learned to gather all available information before making critical decisions. "Nothing," I said finally. "Not tonight. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with before I do anything." I returned to the party and somehow managed to play the role of gracious host for another 3 hours. I gave a toast, thanking everyone for celebrating Sophia, watched her blow out 40 candles on the custom cake I'd ordered from her favorite bakery, and smiled for dozens of photos that would later become evidence of the last normal night of our marriage. But while I performed the role of loving husband, my mind was already working, cataloging every interaction between Sophia and Blake, noting the way other guests responded to him, and beginning to formulate a plan for what came next. By the time the last guest left at nearly midnight, I'd made a decision. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. Based on Madison's financial analysis and Blake's behavior at the party, I was dealing with something much more calculated and potentially dangerous. What I didn't know yet was how right I was, and how much deeper this betrayal extended than even Madison had suspected. The morning after the party, I woke up to Sophia humming in the shower, the sound drifting through our bedroom like nothing had changed. She emerged wrapped in her favorite Turkish cotton towel, skin glowing from what I now realized wasn't just from her skincare routine. For 18 hours, I'd been carrying the weight of her betrayal while she moved through our home with complete normalcy. "Amazing party last night," she said, kissing my forehead before heading to her walk-in closet. "Everyone's still posting photos. My engagement is through the roof." I managed a smile and mumbled something about being glad she enjoyed it. What she didn't know was that I'd already been awake for 2 hours, sitting in my home office with my laptop, beginning the kind of digital investigation that had made CyberShield's reputation. The first thing I discovered was that Blake Morrison wasn't just a personal trainer. Using the same network penetration tools I employed for corporate security assessments, I traced his digital footprint across multiple platforms. What I found was disturbing. Blake maintained 7 different social media profiles under slight variations of his name, each targeting different demographics of wealthy clients. His LinkedIn profile listed him as a wellness investment consultant, in addition to personal training. His Instagram account, which Sophia followed under the handle at Blake Elite Training, showed him at exclusive resorts, luxury car dealerships, and high-end restaurants, photos that suggested an income far beyond what any trainer could legitimately earn. But the real breakthrough came when I accessed financial records using the same techniques I'd teach corporate clients to identify internal threats. Sophia's bank statements revealed a pattern I'd missed because I'd trusted her to manage her own accounts. The $47,000 in cash advances Madison had identified was just the beginning. Over 8 months, Sophia had made 17 separate transfers to an account registered under Morrison Fitness Enterprises, amounts ranging from $3,500 to $12,000, always perfectly timed to avoid triggering automatic bank reporting threshold. The transfers were labeled as business consulting fees and equipment purchase. More concerning was what I found when I traced Morrison Fitness Enterprises through corporate registration databases. The company was incorporated in Delaware with a registered address that led to a strip mall mailbox service. Blake Morrison was listed as CEO, but the company had 2 other principals, David Chen and Marcus Thompson, names that meant nothing to me but would soon become very significant. I decided to call Detective Riley Chen, whom I'd met through a cybersecurity conference, where she'd spoken about financial crimes targeting high-net-worth individuals. Detective Chen worked with the LAPD's Commercial Crimes Division and specialized in cases involving digital fraud and relationship exploitation. "Ethan," she said when I explained the situation, "what you're describing sounds like a romance scam, but with a sophisticated twist. Instead of targeting lonely people online, they're using physical attraction and fitness culture to access wealthy married individuals." She agreed to meet me that afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown LA, away from both my office and home. Detective Chen was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me understand why the LAPD had recruited her from the FBI's cybercrime unit. "The financial patterns you've identified are textbook," she explained, reviewing the documentation. "But the scale suggests this isn't just about your wife. Blake Morrison and his associates are likely running multiple operations simultaneously." She showed me a tablet displaying what appeared to be a law enforcement data. "We've had Blake Morrison on our radar for 6 months, but we've been waiting for the right case to build a comprehensive investigation. Your situation might be exactly what we need." Detective Chen explained that her unit had received complaints from 3 other wives whose husbands had discovered suspicious financial activity linked to personal trainers. In each case, the women claimed they were victims of manipulation, unaware that their trainers were using them to access business. The challenge is proving that the women were unwilling participants versus willing accomplice. Your wife's level of involvement will determine whether she faces charges or becomes a cooperating witness. That evening, I confronted Sophia directly. I waited until after dinner when we were sitting on our pool deck with glasses of wine, the setting sun painting the mountains in shades of orange, the kind of romantic evening that would have been perfect under different circumstances. I know about. The wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the stone. For a moment, her face cycled through expressions I'd never seen before: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Since last night." "Madison showed me your text messages." What followed was a conversation that lasted until nearly 3 a.m. Sophia admitted to the affair but insisted it had started innocently. According to her version, Blake had gradually convinced her that I was planning to leave her, that I'd been having conversations with divorce attorneys, that her only financial security lay in building her own independent income stream. "He said you were already moving money offshore," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He showed me corporate filings that proved you were planning to restructure CyberShield to minimize my community property rights. The corporate filings were sophisticated forgeries, documents that would have convinced anyone without legal expertise. Blake had apparently invested significant resources in creating a believable narrative that cast me as the villain planning to abandon her financially." But as Sophia continued talking, inconsistencies emerged. She admitted to providing Blake with my travel schedule, business contact information, and details about our home security system. She'd also given him access to financial statements and tax returns, information that went far beyond what someone planning to protect herself would need. "How much money have you given him?" I asked. "It's not giving," she protested. "It's investing. Blake has connections with cryptocurrency ventures and fitness franchise opportunities. Everything I've contributed is supposed to double within 18 months. The total amount was staggering. $73,000 over 8 months. Money that Blake had convinced her to withdraw from our joint accounts and her individual investments. Money that, according to her, was generating returns in offshore cryptocurrency accounts she couldn't access until the investment maturation period ended. I realized I was dealing with something far more sophisticated than a simple affair. Blake had constructed an elaborate financial fraud using emotional manipulation and forged documents. Sophia wasn't just cheating. She was being systematically exploited by someone who specialized in targeting wealthy couples. The next morning, Sophia moved into our guest room, claiming she needed space to think about our marriage. But I suspected the real reason was that Blake had instructed her to create distance while they figured out their next move. That afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Blake Morrison's voice was casual, friendly, completely at odds with the situation. "Ethan, this is Blake. I think we should meet and discuss this situation like adults. There are some things about your marriage you don't understand and some business opportunities that might interest you." The audacity was breathtaking. He was calling me directly, apparently confident that whatever leverage he possessed would protect him from consequences. "I'm listening," I said, activating the call recording app I'd installed that morning. "Your wife is a remarkable woman who deserves better than what she's been getting, but I'm not unreasonable. If you're willing to make certain accommodations, we can resolve this privately without involving lawyers or causing embarrassment for anyone." "What kind of accommodations?" $250,000 transferred to an account I'll specify. In exchange, certain videos and financial documents disappear permanently. Your wife returns home, your marriage continues, and everyone moves forward. The threat was clear. Blake possessed intimate videos of Sophia and potentially compromising financial information about both of us. He was confident enough in his position to demand $250,000 for their return. "I need 48 hours to arrange that kind of transfer," I said. "Of course. I'll text you the account information. And Ethan, just so we understand each other, attempting to involve law enforcement would be very unwise for everyone involved." After the call ended, I immediately contacted Detective Chen. What Blake didn't realize was that his direct threat had just provided law enforcement with the evidence they needed to escalate from surveillance to active investigation. "This is exactly what we've been waiting for," Detective Chen said when I played her the recording. "He's just committed federal extortion. Now we can move forward with search warrants and financial seizures." But even as we planned the legal response, I was developing my own strategy. Blake Morrison had made the mistake of believing I was just another wealthy victim he could manipulate and intimidate. What he didn't understand was that 15 years of building cybersecurity systems had taught me how to think like both predator and prey. The trap I was about to set would expose not just Blake's operation, but the entire network of accomplices who'd been targeting successful men like me across Southern California. The key to any successful cybersecurity operation is making your target believe they're in control while you gather intelligence. Over the next week, I played the role of the compliant husband perfectly. I told Blake I was arranging the $250,000 transfer, buying myself time to coordinate with Detective Chen and develop a comprehensive counter strategy. Meanwhile, I was conducting the most thorough digital investigation of my career. Using CyberShield's most advanced penetration testing tools, I traced Blake's financial network across 17 different accounts, 3 cryptocurrency exchanges, and what appeared to be a sophisticated money laundering operation involving luxury car purchases and immediate resales. The breakthrough came when I discovered that Morrison Fitness Enterprises was just one node in a larger network. David Chen and Marcus Thompson, Blake's business partners, were operating identical schemes in Orange County and San Diego. Their combined operation had targeted 43 high-net-worth individuals over 18 months, generating over $2.3 million in fraudulent transfers. But the scope was even larger than Detective Chen had suspected. Blake's operation included 12 personal trainers working at premium gyms across Southern California. Each trainer was assigned specific demographic targets: tech executives, entertainment industry professionals, real estate developers, and medical practice owners. They weren't just running individual scams. They were operating a coordinated intelligence network. The most disturbing discovery was a shared database containing detailed profiles of their targets. My file included financial statements, travel schedules, business vulnerabilities, and what they called manipulation vectors, psychological weak points they could exploit. Sophia's entry in their system was labeled as primary asset with high compliance and emotional dependency factors. Detective Chen was fascinated by the digital evidence I'd compiled. "This isn't just financial fraud," she explained during one of our meetings. "This is organized identity theft and corporate espionage. Some of the business information they've gathered could be worth millions to competitors." I realized Blake's mistake was assuming I would respond like his previous victims, with panic, shame, and a desperate desire to resolve the situation quietly. Instead, his threats had activated every strategic instinct I'd developed building CyberShield. I wasn't going to pay him. I was going to destroy him. The plan I developed with Detective Chen was elegant in its simplicity. Blake expected me to deliver $250,000 in cryptocurrency to avoid public embarrassment. Instead, I would arrange a face-to-face meeting under the pretense of discussing a legitimate business investment opportunity. Blake's greed and confidence would bring him directly into law enforcement's hands. I contacted him on Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours after his initial threat. "Blake, I've been thinking about our conversation, and you're right about business opportunities. Before I transfer the money, I want to discuss something that could be much more profitable for both of us. His interest was immediately piqued. What kind of opportunity? CyberShield is expanding into fitness industry cybersecurity. Gyms, wellness apps, personal training platforms, they're all vulnerable to data breaches. I need someone with your industry connections to help us identify potential clients. The consulting fees alone could be worth 7 figures annually. I could hear the calculation in his voice as he weighed immediate extortion proceeds against long-term financial gain. That's interesting. When did you want to meet? Tomorrow afternoon, I'll arrange a private dining room at Nobu Malibu. We can discuss the partnership details and handle the other matters simultaneously. Blake agreed immediately, apparently convinced that his intimidation tactics had transformed me from victim to business partner. What he didn't know was that Nobu Malibu's private dining room were equipped with sophisticated audio recording systems, and Detective Chen's team would be positioned throughout the restaurant. That evening, Sophia approached me in my home office, where I was reviewing the final details of the operation. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of hollow expression that comes from weeks of stress. "Ethan, I need to tell you something about Blake," she said, sitting across from my desk. "I think he's been lying to me about everything." Over the next hour, she revealed details that filled in the remaining gaps in my investigation. Blake had convinced her that I was planning to divorce her based on a supposed affair I was having with my business attorney, Jennifer Walsh. He'd shown her fabricated email conversations and doctored photographs that appeared to show Jennifer and me in compromising situations. "He said the only way I could protect myself was to document your financial hiding assets and gather evidence of your business dealings," Sophia explained. "Everything I gave him was supposed to be for my divorce attorney." More significantly, Sophia revealed that Blake had been pressuring her to convince me to invest in cryptocurrency mining operations that he claimed were generating extraordinary returns. The plan was to get me to transfer increasingly large amounts of money into accounts Blake controlled, using my attraction to technology investments as the hook. "How many other wives has he told similar stories?" I asked. "At least 6 that I know of. We've met a few times for what Blake called support group sessions. Women whose marriages were supposedly in trouble and who needed to protect themselves financially." The scope of Blake's psychological manipulation was staggering. He wasn't just exploiting individual relationships. He was creating an entire community of women who believed they were protecting themselves while actually facilitating their own exploitation. Friday afternoon, I arrived at Nobu Malibu 30 minutes early, allowing Detective Chen's team to verify their equipment and positioning. The restaurant's manager, who'd been briefed on the operation, ensured our private dining room was isolated from other guests. Blake appeared exactly on time, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never faced serious consequences for his actions, greeting me with a firm handshake and the kind of smile that had probably charmed dozens of victims. "Ethan, thank you for being reasonable about this situation," he began as we settled into our seats. "I think we can build something mutually beneficial here." For the first 20 minutes, I played my role perfectly, discussing CyberShield's expansion plans and asking detailed questions about the fitness industry's cybersecurity needs. Blake's responses revealed extensive knowledge not just about gym operations, but about the personal financial situations of their wealthy clientele. "The beauty of the fitness industry," he explained, "is that people reveal everything about themselves. Their schedules, their insecurities, their family situations, their financial stress. A good trainer becomes their confessor, their therapist, their most trusted advisor. And you've monetized that trust?" Blake's smile widened. "I've optimized it. These people have more money than they know what to do with. And their marriages are already failing because of their own neglect and selfishness. I'm simply helping accelerate inevitable outcomes while ensuring everyone benefits financially." The casual cruelty of his worldview was breathtaking. He genuinely believed he was providing a service, helping wealthy individuals recognize what he saw as the natural conclusion of their relationships. "Speaking of financial benefits," Blake continued, "shall we handle our other business? I assume you have the transfer information ready." This was the moment Detective Chen had been waiting for. I reached into my jacket and withdrew not transfer documents, but a tablet displaying comprehensive evidence of his entire operation. "Actually, Blake, I have something better than money. I have information." His expression shifted as he recognized bank statements, cryptocurrency transaction records, and screenshots of the victim database he thought was secure. "You see, what you didn't realize is that CyberShield specializes in exactly the kind of digital investigation that can unravel financial fraud networks. Every transaction, every fake document, every manipulated victim, I've traced all of it." Blake's confident demeanor evaporated as he scrolled through the evidence. "This doesn't prove anything illegal. These are legitimate business transactions between consenting adults. including the extortion call you made to me 4 days ago, the one where you demanded $250,000 in exchange for not releasing intimate videos of my wife. That's when Detective Chen entered the private dining room, badge visible, accompanied by 2 federal agents I hadn't met before. Blake Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, extortion, and money laundering. The transformation in Blake's expression was remarkable. The practiced charm and calculated confidence collapsed into something desperate and small. As the handcuffs clicked into place, he looked at me with genuine confusion. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "Your wife was a willing participant in everything. She's going to face charges too." "That's where you're wrong," I replied calmly. "Sophia is going to be a cooperating witness, along with 6 other women you manipulated using the same psychological tactics." As Blake was led away, Detective Chen turned to me with satisfaction evident in her expression. "We've simultaneously executed search warrants at 12 locations across Southern California. This operation is finished. But the real victory wasn't Blake's arrest, or even the recovery of the stolen money. It was the realization that I'd reclaimed control of my own narrative. For weeks, I'd been the victim of someone else's elaborate scheme. Today, I'd become the architect of his destruction. The trap was perfect, but what happened next would determine whether my marriage could survive the systematic betrayal that had nearly destroyed everything I'd worked to build. The FBI raid on Blake Morrison's network made national news 3 days later. "Elite trainer extortion ring targeted tech executives," read the headline in the LA Times. The scope of the operation shocked even seasoned investigators. 12 trainers, 47 victims, and $2.3 million in fraudulent transfers across 18 months. Blake himself faced federal charges carrying a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years. Detective Chen called me that Friday morning with an update that provided the closure I'd been seeking. Blake and his 2 primary associates have agreed to plea bargains in exchange for cooperation with victim restitution. They've provided access to offshore accounts containing $1.8 million that can be returned to victims. The financial recovery was significant, but what mattered more was learning the full scope of how I'd been targeted. The FBI's investigation revealed that Blake's operation had been monitoring CyberShield's public contracts and press releases for over a year before Sophia became his client. They'd specifically researched my background, my marriage, and what they called my vulnerability profile before Blake ever introduced himself to my wife. "Your case was particularly valuable to them, Detective, because CyberShield's client list represented potential targets worth hundreds of millions collectively. Blake wasn't just stealing from you, he was positioning himself to access your entire professional network. The revelation that my company had been the ultimate target, not just my marriage, helped me understand the sophistication of what we'd faced. This wasn't opportunistic infidelity that escalated into financial fraud. It was calculated corporate espionage using romantic manipulation as the primary vector. 3 weeks after Blake's arrest, Sophia and I began intensive couples therapy with Dr. Vanessa Kim, a specialist in trauma recovery and relationship rebuilding. Our twice-weekly sessions in her Beverly Hills office were initially excruciating, forcing us to examine not just the betrayal itself, but the underlying vulnerabilities that had made it possible. "Sophia," Dr. Kim asked during our 4th session, "can you help Ethan understand what made Blake's narrative about your marriage feel believable?" Sophia's answer was painful but illuminating. "For 2 years, I'd been feeling invisible in our relationship. Ethan was building something incredible with CyberShield, and I was proud of him. I felt like I was just existing alongside his success rather than contributing." She explained that Blake had positioned himself as someone who truly saw her potential, who believed she could build something significant independent of my achievement. The fitness influencing, the supplement line discussions, even the cryptocurrency investments were all designed to make her feel like an entrepreneur rather than just a wealthy man's wife. "When Blake showed me those fake documents suggesting Ethan was planning to leave me," she continued, "it confirmed every insecurity I'd been carrying. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was really just desperate to feel important to someone." Dr. Kim helped us understand that Blake's operation succeeded because it exploited genuine relationship dynamics that many successful. The busy partner who assumes their success benefits everyone. The other partner who feels diminished by their lack of independence. The gradual emotional distance that develops when career demands overwhelm personal. The fraud was sophisticated, Dr. Kim observed, but it worked because it activated real feelings that already existed in your marriage. Our recovery process was slow and often frustrating. Some days, Sophia's anger at being manipulated would transform into resentment toward me for not recognizing her emotional needs earlier. Other days, my anger at her betrayal would overwhelm any sympathy for how she'd been exploited. But gradually, we began rebuilding something stronger than what we'd had before. The crisis had forced conversations we'd been avoiding for years. We established new patterns, weekly date nights without phones, monthly weekend getaways where business discussions were prohibited, and a shared commitment to individual therapy alongside our couple's work. 6 months after Blake's arrest, something unexpected happened that helped solidify our healing process. A woman named Jennifer Walsh contacted me through CyberShield's website. She'd read about our case and wanted to share her own experience with Blake's operation. My husband received similar threats, she explained when we met for coffee in Santa Monica. But he paid the $200,000 Blake demanded. Our marriage didn't survive the shame and financial stress. Jennifer's story reminded me that my decision to fight rather than pay had protected not just my own family, but potentially dozens of other victims who would have been targeted if Blake's operation had continued expanding. The professional consequences of our ordeal proved unexpectedly positive. CyberShield's role in exposing the fraud network generated significant media attention, positioning us as experts in personal cybersecurity and relationship-based fraud prevention. We launched a new division focused on protecting high-net-worth individuals from exactly the kind of sophisticated social engineering Blake had employed. More importantly, the experience deepened my relationships with the people who'd supported us throughout the crisis. Marcus Rivera, my business partner, had been instrumental in keeping CyberShield operational while I focused on the investigation. Madison, Sophia's sister, had risked family relationships to reveal the truth. Detective Chen had become not just a professional contact, but a genuine friend. The legal proceedings concluded almost exactly 1 year after Blake's arrest. He received an 18-year federal sentence, while his 2 primary associates received 12 and 14 years respectively. All 47 identified victims received financial restitution, though the emotional damage many had suffered would take much longer to heal. Sophia and I attended Blake's sentencing hearing, not out of vindictiveness, but because Dr. Kim felt witnessing his accountability might provide closure. Seeing Blake in federal prison orange, looking diminished and ordinary rather than charming and powerful, helped us both understand that the person who'd nearly destroyed our marriage was ultimately just a skilled predator who'd finally met consequences. "Do you forgive him?" Sophia asked as we drove home from the courthouse. I considered the question carefully. I don't forgive what he did, but I'm grateful for what I learned. About myself, about us, about the importance of paying attention to the people you love. Today, 2 years later, Sophia and I have built something stronger than what we had before the betrayal. She's launched a successful consulting firm, helping fitness influencers develop legitimate business strategy, work that gives her the independence and professional fulfillment she'd been seeking. I've learned to create space in my schedule for our relationship, recognizing that no business success is worth sacrificing the person you've chosen to share your life with. CyberShield now provides seminars on personal security for high-net-worth individuals, teaching them to recognize the same social engineering tactics Blake used against us. We've helped prevent dozens of similar schemes, turning our painful experience into protection for others. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about cybersecurity or financial fraud, but about the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge would have been about making Blake suffer personally. Justice was about stopping him from harming others and recovering what he'd stolen. The satisfaction I felt watching him arrested wasn't about his pain, but about the restoration of order and the protection of future victims. Sometimes people ask if I regret not simply paying Blake's initial demand to make the situation disappear quietly. The answer is absolutely not. Paying would have validated his business model and funded the expansion of his operation. Fighting back required courage, but it was the only choice that aligned with my values and protected others. If my experience offers any wisdom to others facing betrayal, it's this. Betrayal reveals character, but it doesn't define. How you respond to being betrayed tells you everything about who you really are. I chose to become someone who fights back intelligently, who seeks justice over revenge, and who uses pain as motivation to protect others from similar harm. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately made you stronger? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of resilient survivors who understand that sometimes the greatest challenges lead to the most meaningful growth. Remember, trust intelligently, but never let fear of betrayal prevent you from building authentic connections. The world needs more people willing to love courageously, even when that courage has been tested by those who didn't deserve it. Thank you for listening, and until next time. Protect yourself wisely, but never stop believing in the possibility of genuine partnership with people worthy of your trust.